Okay. Hi everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. It's another wonderful edition of the Eden World Conservation Initiative Green Talk, and this edition is very important and special because it's the World International Forest Day, and then it's an amazing event that we are celebrating, that foresters, um, environmentalists are celebrating all over the world. And of course, it's a very special one because every conservationist, biologists, environmentalists, foresters, and environmental enthusiasts are joining from all over the places across the world. And from all of us from Eden World Conservation Initiative, it's a thing of joy and a great motivation for us to join all our colleagues from other places in the world to celebrate this special day. My name is Olaoluwa Adetula, and I will be a co-host for this event. And I would like to welcome my co-host to Kudirat Oiza. You are welcome, Kudirat.
All right. Good. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
All
It's
right,
nice
thank you
to.
so much. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us too, Kudirat. All right, so we are kickstarting already. We have our guests around, Dr. Yemi, Dr. Yemi Adeyeye, is the global director for GLFX. Is joining us on this special day to discuss the theme for this event. Dr. Adeyeye, you are welcome, sir.
Hi, Olaoluwa. Thanks so much for having me. I'm Kudrat. It's nice to meet you as well.
It's
And
nice to
I'm
meet you
happy to be
too.
here for sure. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. It's a
Thank you,
thing of
sir.
joy it's a thing of joy to host you on this special day, which is the International Forest Day that is being celebrated across the globe. So once again, Dr. Adeyeye, you are welcome to the show.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a
All
pleasure.
right. Yeah. To all our audience joining across the globe, I would like to let you know the general theme for this year's event, and the theme is forest and sustainable production and consumption. So, Dr. Yemi will be doing justice to all the questions we have on ground today, and of course, is a seasoned specialist um, with with a great experience. You can be sure you are going to enjoy all the conversation today. All right, thank you so much for joining us. All right, let's kickstart. All right, so to start with, Dr. Adeyeye, let me ask you, what do you think of the theme for this year's event, and why is it important to discuss this particular theme at this time?
Yeah, Olaoluwa. Yeah, thanks so much for the question. And yeah, I should start by saying Happy International Forest Day to everyone that is watching. And it's nice to have a day every year to reflect about the importance of forest and to discuss forest with everybody, even those who know a lot and those who don't. But the opportunity to always have a particular day to really share some experiences, to learn from others, to celebrate the impact of forest on livelihoods is quite important. And for this year, like every other years, the most of the thematic area that the celebration always focus on are all somewhat interconnected. They all sort of the intention is to bring to the fore the importance of forest in our everyday living, and also for us to understand the how forest would rely on us as human, as we rely on forest to continue to exist. I guess that's where sustainability comes in. So when we say forest for sustainable production and consumption, that's basically talking about we one celebrating forest for its ability to contribute to the productivity and production that serves human lives, and also to celebrate forest in terms of its contribution to food, to water, to other things that we consume. And to remind us, for those of us who are foresters, we may know this already, that about 1.6 billion people around the world living and connected directly with forest. So these people depend directly with forest for food, shelter, their energy, income, medicinal sources, and so on. And that's even if we decide to not, if you don't believe or if you sort of question that everyone in the world, the 7.7 billion people in the world depend on forest, at least you will know that 1.6 billion are directly depending on forest. So, which means that a huge part of the world relies on us, the rest of us, being able to recognize the importance of forest in their lives and be able to, in a way, celebrate what forest has been contributing, which may also bring us into the space of taking required action that would ensure continuous productivity of forest due to this. And one important thing that I think the team for this year does in terms of linking forests to sustainable production, because the keyword there is sustainable production and sustainable consumption. Linking forests to that simply simply causes us to recognize that forest, when sustainably managed, which means when forest is respected, when we continually to think about what we are taking from the forest as much as what we give for forest sustenance, then we can link that to a lot of renewable opportunities, renewable products. For example, the replacement of cemented buildings and high rises with wooden structures of wooden high rises. So this brings to the recognition that there's a huge percentage of, say, greenhouse gases contributed through cement. I don't remember the figure right now, but that cannot be said of wooden products. And it has been demonstrated around the world that you can use wood to make high rises. So which means that there's a lot of innovations that comes out of forest that contributes to sustainability and sustainable livelihood on our side. We live more sustainable when we go to the forest to get most of the resource materials we can. And at the same time, we live more sustainable when in the process of acquiring from the forest, we ensure that our action of production, of removal, of excavation, of taking from the forest is sustainable and well managed. I guess that's like
Yeah.
the broader reflection on the team.
Thank you so much for giving us a very great background of what we are trying to look at for this year's event. Kudirat, over to you.
Good afternoon, sir, from here. I would like to
Good
welcome you
afternoon,
once
Kudrat.
again to the show. And I also like to say Happy International Forest Day to you. So, my question goes I would like to ask, what are your views on sustainable forest resources? What do you think of it?
Okay. Um, okay, thanks, Kudirat. Um, my views on sustainable forest resources does not depart largely from the, say, imagined views or prominent views of sustainable forest resources. I mean, when we talk about, or when we think about, or when we discuss sustainable forest resources, we look at it usually from different angles. One of it is from the angle of economic prosperity, ability for forests to support economic prosperity of humans, which means when you are able to access resources from forest to build your own economic sustenance, economic livelihoods, income opportunities. So you could discuss sustainable forest from that angle. Another angle is that you can discuss sustainable forest from environmental protection, the ability for us to be safer and to have more serene, healthy environment, and to have an environment that is complementary to our economic needs. So to ensure that we have a forest that is managed in light of this need. So which means that you are aware of the kind of species that is grown around a particular forest. You are aware of the species that you assess when you need to take out of the forest. You are aware of the patterns of land use in a particular space and how interjection of human in this particular land use space could tilt and yield different outcomes. So which means you're very, very aware of when to assess a particular forest product, how to assess the forest product, and what equipment or lack thereof that need to be used in that particular system. And then the third angle is social well-being, forest connected to social well-being, in the sense that there are a lot of cultural and social attachments that we have with forest. And this is even more so for communities of forest, for communities living in forest, or what we call the forested communities. I can't remember the term right now. So these are the three primary angles that you're going to look at sustainable forestry from. And of course, these three angles are quite interconnected. A reference to one is a dependency of the other. If you talk about economic outcomes of forest, you need to be aware of the environmental and social dimensions that can shape this particular outcome. And in real terms, or in tangible terms, one would say sustainable forest resources require, say, regulated and planned forest production processes. There needs to be some kind of regulation, some kind of plan, some kind of operational plan that is yielded, is looking at the outcome that we want to get from it. Sustainable forest resources would call our attention to both the aspect of reforestation and afforestation, when to do these particular forest practices, when to ensure that for example, instead of you going in for product to assess forest wood through clear cuts, you use other means to ensure that there are, sustainable, that forest stand remains after felling is done, to protect the environment, for example. And forest resource, sustainable forest resources will also speak to proper utilization, reduction of waste in forest, recycling in forest, renewability. So these are key words, these are key practices when you talk about sustainable forest management of sustainable forest resources.
Wow, amazing. Thank you for shedding light on that. That's quite insightful. Thank you so much, Dr. Adeyeye. And then moving on, I think one of the important things that we need to talk about today, and I feel the conversation won't be complete if we do not look at some of the barriers to the thing we are discussing today. In developing countries, or let's say underdeveloped countries, or let's say in the third world, like they call it. Some of these things might not go well. When you talk of sustainable forest management, the basic idea is that using forest resources without exhausting it, in quote, without for your future generation to be able to benefit from them. When you are talking of these things, in underdeveloped countries or developing countries, I think, in my opinion, I think some of these practices are kind of difficult to follow. Let me ask you, Doctor, do you think there could be barriers to sustainable production and consumption in underdeveloped or developing countries? Do you think there are barriers that could impede the growth of sustainability in these countries?
Yeah, Lala, thanks for the question. I think in terms of barriers to sustainable forestry production and consumption, I think that cuts across the world, to be honest. Everywhere around the world has this limitation and are struggling with different challenges here and there. In the north, they have their challenge in how to, prioritize sustainable forest management, enough recognition for it. The same thing in the south, the global south. And what I would say that is particular, at least from my experience and from discussions with people about the global south, is that we are thinking our pursuit of industrialization in our pursuit of modernity, we are decreasingly, or how could I put that? I think there is a sort of there is a withdrawal of enough level of recognition for forest. And as we take that path of industrialization, the more we industrialize, the lesser we seems to recognize the potential contribution of forest to this. And I think that's a sort of a sad reality that is shaping the kind of pathway we're choosing to modernize, to industrialize, to develop our cities. So we've taken the pathway that seemed to be an antagonist to forest in itself, and I think that's a very very significant barrier that confronts a lot of developing nations. And in connection to that is the what makes this a kind of an outcome. This barrier is the we have really, I think our regulatory framework is still quite a drag. We don't have strong regulatory framework for forest. We don't seem to be up to speed with our regulation is not up to speed with a kind of contested output and demand and interest of the different actors around forest. So we are in a situation where most of our policies are made in the 80s, 70s, 60s, and maybe some in the 90s, and we have so many different pathways by which people intrusively access forest in many developing nations. So there are a lot of opportunities to cut corners. There are a lot of opportunities to use what's it called, some concession practices that are not particularly enabled by strong, that will not in a good situation be enabled by regulatory policies, but then they are, because somehow the regulatory infrastructure, both from the policies to the policy enforcement, appears to have the gap in there that most of the industries are taking advantage of, and the loggers. So the outcome is that we have a lot of forests that are depleting very quickly, and we have a lot of forest cover. The rate of reduction in forest cover in many countries in the global south is alarming. So I think this getting, and then in connection to what we're doing today, like the International Forest Day, which is basically an opportunity to educate, right? Because I think one of the problems we have as well is kind of a limited, not too robust education about forest, and this is not just a global south issue. This is really a global issue. Even in global spaces right now, there are still contestation around the contribution of forest to climate change adaptation, or mitigation. They're still highly contested, highly, really reduced in those conversations. You have us thinking and knowing a lot more about economic measures and other kind of renewable energy and so on, but people not really zooming in into the forest terrestrial land use domain as much as it would have been required. So which speaks to the limitation of or the challenge of education, limited education about forests, what forests can do, and how forests support both social, economic, and environmental well-being of humans. And this lack of education then translates into lack of innovation, because most of the innovation you see, innovation happening in the global north, which means at least the global north is a step ahead of us in terms of understanding the potentials that the forest offers. But in the global south, we're still struggling with this. There are a lot of small pockets of innovations. You see people doing really fantastic things with bamboo and their rattan and waste and so on, but they're not able to scale, which is an issue. which is connected to the regulatory barrier I was talking about, right? Because if regulation is supporting these small initiatives to scale, that would also be in a way by which our innovations are scaling. But our innovations are not scaling. They're not scaling because we have in a situation where we are regulatorily handicapped in a way, such that we can't scale, which is the bad news. So we need to find a way to scale, basically. And the other really a final statement from my side on that question is going to be that our land use approach in many global southern countries, Nigeria, Latin America, and so on. They are subjected to competing needs. We have so many things we want to do with our land. We want to build houses, we want to build industries, we want to have farmland, we want to graze land, we want to. And in a situation where there is limited education about how to engage multiple objectives in land use, there are limited or confrontational regulatory landscape that does not support people to scale innovations, and that does not hinder or support enforcement of policy in forestry. And then we are in a system where there are, as a consequence, there are robust lack of innovations and so on. Then, of course, the competition on land use and the way we use land is going to be a disaster. So we have today now we want to enlarge a lot of cities in Nigeria. You see what is happening in Lagos, for example, in Nigeria, where there are new neighborhoods coming in every time, and for those new places to be on the market for sale, a lot of forests have to go down. And the question is going to be, what is happening when those forests are cut down? There are some land use swap happening or not? What are we actually doing that consciously or not? And this is a demonstration or a sort of an illustration of what is happening in many other countries as well. Serious land use swap and competition that is basically counterproductive or the counters our supposed sustainable thinking for forest. All right, let me stop on there.
Thank you so much. This is getting more interesting. I would like to point out an issue while you were discussing. Something popped up in my mind. Of course, you talked about lack of regulations, innovations, and lack of enforcement to some of the regulations we have on ground. But Doctor, don't you think the poverty increase in some of these countries could be also a barrier to ensuring sustainable forest production and consumption? Because a lot of people just want to live for the moment. They don't care what it takes. They don't care about tomorrow. They just want to survive for the day. They just want to be good for the day. Don't you think the poverty increase in some of these countries too, or let me say in developing countries? Okay, don't let me say that. Don't you think the poverty increase could be a kind of barrier to the thing we are discussing?
Yes and no. So yes, in the sense that when people have limited resources and limited choices, because that's what comes with poverty, your choices are limited, and your needs are there. Every human we have a need, and we have needs, and if resources to meet this need are different or are reduced for some particular people, those needs don't suddenly go away. People still need to meet those needs. And as a consequence, people might, result into going into the forest and taken out of the forest indiscriminately. That is a potential outcome. But at the same time, it depends on how we place poverty within the conversation. Do we place poverty as a consequence or poverty as a driver? You know what I mean? Is poverty driving us to go into the forest, to engage in forest accessibility indiscriminately, or the outcome of us going into the forest indiscriminately and accessing resources non-sustainably yield poverty as an outcome. So it depends on where you put poverty. Of course, you can put poverty in both places. And for example, if you there are countries who are not faring too bad in terms of their forest cover change over time. It doesn't mean it's perfect, but they seem to be there is more stronger effort towards stabilizing, say, forest cover change. There is much more. Some countries in Southeast Asia are example of countries that are really, to a large extent, trying really harder to stabilize their forest cover change and to push forward sustainable forest practices. I would say Nepal is an example. It doesn't mean that it's perfect, but it does mean that they are, in a way, they are more conscious and there's a lot of more, civil discussion and civil assembling around the utility and importance of forest. There are a lot of community forest managed by communities who want to see their forest survive, who want to see their forest managed sustainable. And there are countries where these conversations are not happening at all. And if you look at the, say, poverty level differentiation between some of these countries, one could argue that Nepal, in the large scheme of things, have a lot of need and less opportunity to meet those needs. I won't use the word poverty because sometimes we might misconstrue poverty, and because of the way we may construe poverty, it's easy for us to leverage it as a point of excuse for what we do. So let's just look at it from the angle of needs and opportunity to meet those needs. And when you look at it that way, you realize that there are a lot of nation states that they have a larger size of their population able to meet their need, but still that doesn't particularly translate into good news for sustainable forest management. So while poverty could be a driver for forest change negatively, it could also be a consequence of negative forest change. So because we are poor may not really be a good excuse for not sustainably manage the forest. Rather, we may be poor because we have non-sustainably, indiscriminately assessed our resources, and we continue to do so over time. That does not reduce poverty at all. That only brings recognition to the way we discuss poverty and how we may leverage it as an excuse when we discuss resource management.
Wow, this is insightful, I must confess. Thank you so much, Doc, for that. Yeah, moving on in the conversation. I would like us to talk about attitude. You cannot take away attitude from whatever we do. Looking at it from different perspectives, and then getting to know some other stakeholders too, or to bring some other stakeholders into play too. Let me ask you, Doctor, that what should be the attitude of different stakeholders, that is the government agencies, the private bodies, the NGOs, in ensuring the theme we are discussing today? What should be the attitude towards sustainable production and consumption of our forests?
Yeah, thanks for the question. You know what, Olaluwa? I think one of the tragedy that of humans, in terms of our behavior, our attitude, is that what we don't work for, we don't appreciate. What is not an outcome of our sweat is usually that item with so much lack of recognition. Is that thing that we don't really reflect a lot about? We don't really want to stress more about. We don't really want to dwell in in its reflection on how can we engage, or how might we engage appropriately with this particular item. And the reason why I say that is because forest in itself first didn't come to bear because we were so smart in drawing out lines on the earth and then saying this is where forest is gonna be, and then we started to plant all those species and so on. Substantially, forest existed before we became aware of it. A lot of us are born into the existence of forest cover, and because we never really had to sweat a lot to really have them. Of course, yeah, we can speak about plantation forestry and private forestry and so on, and how we then plant and so on. But we should also remember that the focus of most of this planting that we do are focused on production and consumption. Our products, they are focused on, we want to produce something to get it out and then use it and so on. It's not from a space of recognition that this thing needs to exist just because it has a larger contribution to humanity and its existence. And I think because of this tragedy, you can see this tragedy reflect from the attitude of a lot of people and stakeholders in the society. And with actors that have power, you would expect that there are going to be some positive attitude change, a change towards some positive thinking and doing things. And for example, for government, my own suggestion is always going to be the same around where their power lays, which is basically in the regulatory policy domain. There's really an important need for governments, intergovernmental bodies, and so on. Maybe let's zoom in on government right now, actually, because I believe that a lot of intergovernmental organizations are not faring badly with policies. I think it's the translation of those policies into context on the ground, basically for different nations to pick them up and translate them into how they might use them or leverage them in their own national context is where some of the lack is. And I think government needs to be a bit more sharp. That it's going to get sharper with regulation development, regulatory revision of the existing ones, and regulatory enforcement. Because I think forestry is really suffering from lack of that in a lot of countries where there are a lot of excavations and indiscriminate forest access. So that's for government. For private bodies, I think what private bodies can do a lot of things. One is they can encourage and contribute to governance processes. They can also develop more robust corporate social responsibility to support communities and forested communities around forest to be able to engage in diversified livelihood opportunities. Because like we were saying in the last elements of the conversation, that poverty can be a driver, it can also be an outcome. And if we recognize poverty from these particular angles, then we can say that there is a space for diversified opportunities, diversified portfolio of opportunities for forested communities to be able to engage into livelihood opportunities from different sources and not just from the forest. So which might limit dependency of forest, which is a good thing. And I think private bodies who are, increasingly around the world trying to develop a robust corporate social responsibility could look into that particular gap and contribute to the society. And same goes for NGOs. NGOs should, in terms of attitudinal change, should have stronger presence in the advocacy efforts and education efforts, educating communities, people, institutions, government, and taking people to account, and being there to be bridges for whatever is inexistent, whatever is a gap in the society. I think that's where they can flourish a lot. And for we everyday people, we still we continue to learn about forest. We continue to advocate. We continue to teach each other. We have an open mind to it. We learn from the positive transformations of forest in different parts of the world, and we bring recognition to the gaps that exist around us. We don't pretend as if things are okay. And for those of us who are able to access up to date knowledge, because innovations increasingly are happening in forestry as well. There's a lot of, there's wood using nanotechnology in the health sector and so on. So really, really, really interesting things are happening. And we should continue in the pathway of innovation, and NGOs, private bodies, government should find a role in supporting the scaling of a lot of innovations on the ground, because there are innovations in our spaces, there are innovations, small pockets around the world. Some people are even trying to build cars with wood right now. So anyway, whatever innovation is helping us to be more sustainable, this should be supported, and the attitudinal change to make sure that this is a focus and this is addressed needs to come to the fore.
Wow. Thank you so much for that. Before I let you go, Dr. Adeyeye, and before I take your final words, I think our conversation today might not be complete if we do not talk about the people. In Africa, here in Africa, you have people residing in the forest, and I don't know if it happens in some other places across the world, but for Africa, we have people residing in the forest, some people close to the forest. And when you talk of that too, there's this issue of community-based forest management. How do you relate with this? What do you think the people themselves, especially in developing countries, or let me say in Africa, what do you think the people can do to ensure that sustainability is enforced in a way?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Alalu. I think, well, first, forest-dependent communities are around the world, not just in the global south. In Canada over here, there are forest-dependent communities. There are people who are living in forests across generations. The same in Europe, in the north of Europe, there are always people who want to live closer to the land, and they've always been doing so over time. And of course, what would be defined as forest may differ from the countries to countries. But just to bring that up first, and then in terms of what communities can do, in a way, I would argue that one of the actors that seems to be doing a lot already are the communities living in forest. They seems to be the ones that requires a lot of recognition for what they are doing, a lot of recognition from the rest of us in terms of people who are basically the guardians. They are like the guardians of the forest. They understand much more what forest can do and what forest can take away from people. They've over generation, a lot of these communities, forest dependent communities, access their needs from the forest, all the way from their building materials to the food to medicine to protection and so on, what have you. But to answer your question, what they can do more would always be in the light of to continue to form stronger community structure around forest, because that's one thing. I used Nepal as an example the other time, and the reason is because also Nepal have really strong community forest reserve groups, like an association of communities around forest. So they are really strong ones that advocate for their forest, that always stand in Ghana and communicate what the forest dwellers need, from the government, what regulatory change needs to happen. And I think the advice that would be useful at this point is for communities to continue to do this, because not all communities have stronger assemblies that are able to speak to power. So some countries have it more than others. So for communities that don't, this is an encouragement that this is really useful, because coming as a unit, to intercede at the governance level is very, very important. It has more strength than otherwise. And to not, because one thing I also want to do is that one thing that is important for us to recognize when we have this conversation is also that we shouldn't unnecessarily put a burden on the communities who are already burdened, because they are already suffering a lot. They are really communities in forest are too aware usually of what is being lost every day. It's already a burden on a lot of communities, on forest dependent communities. So we shouldn't put a lot of yoke on them to, hey, you know what, continue to do this, continue to be upset about it, and continue to help the rest of us to intercede and solve all our problems, even though they are not the only one that need the forest, you know, because there's these statistics I mentioned at the beginning, or data, if you will, that 1.6 billion people depend directly on forests. Those kind of statistics probably shouldn't really exist in a way. The reason is because it sort of makes it feel like, oh, okay, those people depend on forests. We don't depend on forests, which is not true. We may not be living close to forests, but right now I have a table in my office that is made of wood, right? I eat food and fruits that are coming from the forest. I breathe in air that is coming from green covers. So in a way, there may be geographical spatial distance from the forest, but that does not distance me from the utility of the forest or the advantages it confers. Yeah, so that's my advice and my reflection about communities.
Wow, thank you so much, Doc, for that. Kudirat, you're welcome back.
Okay, thank you so much. I've really learned a lot. Like seriously, I've learned a lot. So I would like to know about before your final words, I would like to know more from you. What do you think that the non-governmental organization can add to their program? Because most of the time, you go to most communities, plant trees, sanitize them about the importance of tree planting and all that. Then after some time, you go there and you find out that these trees are still being cut by the same communities. They are not taking care of it. But once the tree is being planted, the person left in charge of taking care of those trees they did not do the work. The only thing they want to do is to cut it down and make use of it in terms of firewood and all that for fuel. So I would like to know, what do you think the non-governmental organization can add to their program in order to be able to curb this, especially in terms of deforestation?
Yeah, thanks for your question, Kudirat. I think the problem we have is that we want to engage in solutions in isolation. We want to believe that if we plant tree, then we solve our problem. We forget that if we plant tree, there's a reason why the tree are lost in the first place. Maybe we should ask ourselves, why is this land bare, and why do we need to plant tree now? Now, let me give you an illustration. Usually, there is a gap in policy that allow people to go and just cut down the trees. So if the policy is still remain, people will just still go back and just cut it down, right? If there is no particular political will to ensure that this tree that we are seeing right now, no one dare touches it, it's not gonna make it. And the reason is because the needs of people and the lesser recognition for the importance of the forest around the actors that can affect the existence of that forest is not taken into account. So what I would advise, what I think will be useful for NGOs because tree planting is a very common exercise, is to really, maybe we should fight for regulatory protection first. We should basically think about how can the forest that we want to plant right now, how will it be here in 10 years? What will make it be here in 10 years? And it won't be here in 10 years automatically just because we planted it. It will likely be here in 10 years because there is a policy that says, written by the government, for example, that says this place is now declared a no-touch zone, out of reach, for example. If there's a policy that states that, number one, and there is a consideration to for example, forest communities around that place, that support is also important. Are the communities also willing to have that land area turned into forest? Or is it just a land grabbing exercise? where you just want to get to a place and you want forest there and you start to plant forest. You're not considering that maybe there's some existing competing contested land use on that particular place where you want to plant forest now. So which means immediately you turn your back, those who are competing for that land might just come back and cut it down. So there's this sort of considerations. There's a more robust, so to plant tree in itself is not just a solution. It's a solution that never holds. And we've seen it over and over again that it's never going to continue to hold. If we plant trees in isolation, in fact, we are probably generating more problem because they can lead into a lot of local land use conflict. What we may need to start from is to always, because unfortunately, our actions, because of, for humans to become a modern society, now that we can call ourselves modern Homo sapien, it as a result of rules and regulations, unfortunately. Humans are not just civil in its own sense. Across history, the more regulation and the more guidance and enforcement of those regulations humans have, the more modern they seem. So which means we cannot really undermine the role of governance and regulatory policies in whatever we do. People need to know that if they do something, there's a consequence for it, unfortunately. And for forestry in particular, we've seen over and over again how people will go into forest reserve and start to cut it down and take products out of it indiscriminately. And this will not stop until there are forest guard enforcement. So the same thing holds for tree planting. When you want to go somewhere to plant a tree, you need to ask yourself, are there regulatory framework that will protect this thing action we're taking right now? Or are we just doing a service for the TV and for video camera so that it shows that we're planting trees? So that's where the NGOs might be missing it. They need to start from advocating for a kind of a policy protection of this particular exercise we want to do. What would make these trees that are planted, what will make it stand for the next 10 years, for the next 20 years, for the next 30 years? Regulation, very key. And support of communities around this particular landscape is also very key.
Yeah, over to you, Kudirat.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. I really learned a lot. Thank you. I think I'll add it to my own project as well. So I would like to hear your final words. What do you have to say to us?
All right. Thanks so much for having me. It's a bright morning in Calgary, and it's nice to see your faces. And yeah, I'm always happy to talk about forest because there's a lot to talk about, and there's a lot of appreciation to give as well. Because sometimes when you cut down the last tree, the last woman dies, I don't think we don't really dwell in that thinking for too long. We just say it, and just move on because, we never really paid to breathe. We don't really pay to exist, to think, to be alive. And I think having a day like this helps us to bring some more recognition, to help us reflect a bit more than we would normally do in our daily lives. And for everyone who is watching or that will watch this, it's really an important day. It's one that you should go out and go for a walk, look at a forest, embrace a tree, hug a tree today, show appreciation for what the forest do for humans. Tell someone about forest today. Share something about forest with your friends, with your colleagues. Ask people about their thinking about forest. And I think that would have been a good celebration well spent. Thanks.
Wow, thank you so much, sir. It's having you on the show. Thank you for being a blessing to everybody. And I must say, the transcript of this conversation would really go a long way, and we'll try as much as possible to have the transcript out. Then we can get a memo from it, and of course, continue to learn from the insights you have really brought out in this event. So thank you so much, Dr. Adeyeye, for joining us. We are grateful on behalf of everybody attending World. Thank you so much for being a great blessing and for being an amazing role model too.
Oh,
Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Olaloa. Thanks so much, Kudirat. It's really nice
thank
to be invited and to have this discussion. Have a good
All
day.
right. Yeah. So we'd like to let you
uh,
go, Dr.
thank
Adeyemi. Yeah, Dr. Adeyeye. All right. I would like to call on Meshach. Meshach is a co-founder at Heading World Initiative. So he will be giving a presentation on how to plant a tree. And I don't think I'm getting the title right. So when it comes up, yeah, you hear more about it. Welcome, Meshach.
Mm. All right, hello, Loa. Happy International Forest Day to everyone. Okay. Uh, all right. So we're going to do something shortly. Okay. One of the things we do at Eden World is tree planting campaign, and we encourage people to plant trees. And we had a lot of energy to that to ensure that people do it. We do several programs among students in schools and in other places. Okay, in Nigeria, and we are hoping also to be more global, to go global and do more across the world. Okay, so today we are going to be looking at something interesting, and we tagged it how to plant trees without planting trees. Okay, how to plant trees without planting trees. And what we're introducing to us is Ecosia, which is the search engine that plants trees. So we're looking at how that you can contribute to tree planting. You're not spending directly, you're not directly spending your money, you're not directly going to the field, but you are taking specific actions to ensure that other people, okay, they do this work on your behalf, okay, but you are contributing to getting the job done. All right. So, and that is what we're going to be talking about with Ecosia. So, I'm going to be introducing us to Ecosia. Ecosia is the search engine that plant trees. So, I'll go to Ecosia website so we can really see what is Ecosia. Okay, this is ecosia.org, and Ecosia is a search engine just like Google that you use on your laptop, on your phones, and everything. And the interesting thing is, before I go ahead, we need to lay a disclaimer. Ecosia did not sponsor this video. We are not paid to do this. It is just a discovery from us at Eden World, and we feel we should share it so that people can contribute to tree planting across the world. So Ecosia is a search engine that plants trees, and you can see the number of trees planted by Ecosia, right? And okay, we plant trees in 30 plus countries with local organization. And the interesting thing, we have Nigeria as one of those countries where trees are being planted. You can see where trees are being planted, and not everywhere in Nigeria at the moment. Okay, but we keep it will spread across to Nigeria and other parts of Africa very soon. You can see Burkina Faso, Indonesia, and yeah, a lot of other parts of the world, Mexico, trees in Sudan, in Brazil, in United Kingdom, trees in Cote d'Ivoire, in Mali, in Senegal, in Ethiopia, and all of that. So how do you contribute to what Ecosia is doing? How do you contribute to that? That is what we want to talk about now. It is just the way you search on Google and you use Google search to search for something. Okay, let's say I'm searching for Forest Day, for example, and I search for it. So just the same way I get response from Google, I get everything. That is the same thing I get. Then you can see over here, I'm seeing the number of searches I've made. And based on the number of searches I make, all right, based on the number of searches I make, there is an ad revenue, just like the same way Google makes money. But this way, what Ecosia make, they donate 80% of their revenue to tree planting. And that is something interesting. And that is one of the application of technology in forestry. That's one of the application of technology in forestry. So how do you make Ecosia your default search engine? There are two ways you can go about that. You can use the normal Ecosia website. Just go to ecosia.org and you click on add Ecosia to Chrome. And if it is Edge you are using, whatever browser you are using, you are going to see an opportunity to add it. So when you click this, right, it takes you to your Chrome Web Store. If it is Microsoft Edge, it takes you to Microsoft Store, and you are able to add it to your Edge. And when I had this extension, okay, downloads quickly, and it adds to my extension. Yeah, start searching. So whenever I want to search for, just click on keep it. Click on keep it. Whenever I want to search for anything, when I do this, it opens Ecosia for me, and that becomes my default search engine, and that is what I keep using. And as I use it to do my searches, I'm going to use Forest Day again. Okay, it begins to count for me. So how do you log the number of searches you've made so that you can know the number of trees you've planted? All right, so you can see on the average you need around 45 searches to plant a tree. So by the time you make about 45 searches using Ecosia, you automatically plant a tree. So when you make 90 searches, you've planted 2 trees without leaving your room, and by just taking your daily actions, the thing you normally do every day. So how do you log this? How do you know, okay, I've made so number of searches, so that it keeps storing it for you? You can sign in, and it is very easy to sign in. You don't need a password. All you just need is to type an email. Your email. And when you do that, click email me the magic link. When they send it to you, by the time you go to your email and you click on this link, it automatically logs you in and you begin to search. So that is the way Ecosia works, and you can begin to contribute to the cost of Ecosia starting from today. You can begin to contribute to what the cost of Ecosia starting from today, and at the same time, you are contributing to the world at large by planting trees. And today is International Forest Day. So one way you can celebrate International Forest Day is to go online, use your mobile devices, ensure that your default search engine platform is Ecosia, on your Google Chrome, on your browsers that you're using. Ensure that it's Ecosia, because the actions you take, you are contributing to the world at large by planting trees. So with this, you are planting trees without planting trees. That is, you are planting trees indirectly without having to go to the field to plant trees by yourself. And this is a good thing that every one of you should do. So go to ecosia.org, or go to your default Chrome web store or your default browser web store and download the Ecosia plugin. It is available on mobile devices, on laptops, and on other kind of browsers that you use. So that is it. Thank you, guys, and happy International Forest Day.
Yeah, thank you so much, Meshach. It's great having you to talk about Ecosia. All right. So we want to sincerely appreciate everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this special edition. And then I would like to let you know, Meshach, can you come back to the studio? All right. So I would like to let you know that in commemoration of today's event, we also planted trees physically in Ibadan, Oyo State, Nigeria. Yeah, so we did that. 1 minute. So we planted trees in Oyo State, in Ibadan, Oyo State, Nigeria, and then sorry, I won't be able to share my screen, at Aberdeen College, Ibadan, Nigeria. So
I think something is
our
wrong
team,
with it.
yeah, sorry for that, so our team were there to plant trees. So it's also a great way to celebrate the event, which is the International Forest Day, and we want to sincerely appreciate everybody for joining the conversation. Thank you to my co-host, Kudirat. Thank you so much. And to all our team members, we say a very big thank you to you. All right. So enjoy the rest of the day and keep planting trees.
Keep planting
Thank you.
trees. Keep planting trees. Keep planting
Great.
trees.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.